And even Tim Walz has claimed that any investigation of this fraud is akin to white supremacy,
no,
which is
he
a
hasn't.
ridiculous
He has not claimed that.
He
He has not said that.
He has said that.
He has not said that.
This is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy. The idea of white supremacy.
Okay, so update here. CNN is still desperately trying to fact check Nick Shirley and the conservatives over the whole Somali daycare scandal by using some of the most transparent forms of state propaganda you will ever see and masking that as actual journalism. And we correctly identified this from the beginning, by the way. I pointed out that no mainstream media, when you come to us and try to argue, Minnesota officials said that there's no fraud going on, therefore there's no fraud, that's not journalism. That's not you refuting what the conservatives are saying, especially when our wide-scale accusation, just to be clear, was never just that the Somalis were committing fraud. We were arguing that the state government, aka Tim Walz, are in on it, and therefore you asking Tim Walz if there was fraud going on is a completely ridiculous argument to even make in the first place. That would be like asking a convicted criminal, hey, did you do it? They say no, and then you just say, hey, look, guys, the convicted criminal said he didn't do it, therefore he's not guilty. Are you serious? And the most hilarious part about it all is that you have people like Abby Phillip who not only are trying to, refute what we're saying about this, but they think they're so smart. Right? The false pseudo-intellectualism, the credentialism, the elitism, where they're like, whoa, these independent journalists are just YouTubers. They don't practice the high standards of fact-checking that everybody else does. And we're the real journalists. We went to school. Do you have a master's degree, Nick Shirley? And then this is the slop that they try to sell us as like the fact-check and just assume, oh, because we're on TV, because we're wearing fancy clothes, therefore people won't realize that we're absolute freaking midwits, right? Which is probably the definition of what Abby Phillip is. It's what we call a pseudo-intellectual or a dumb smart person, right? And I think that widely describes, frankly, liberalism as a whole. It's the same thing on, say, the COVID vax, right? It's like you have very low IQ people who really have no capacity for rational thinking, but they just have pure instinct, and they're like, I don't want to take that. You have high IQ people who, understand the reasons not to do it, but of course, that's the middle, right? The mid IQ, people who think they're really smart, but they're not. That's where you always get the, I trust the government type of nonsense, right? It's the same thing, frankly, with mass migration as it pertains to, this whole Somali debate. Low IQ people say what? I don't want them immigrants here. They don't even know why. They just don't, right? But high IQ people understand, hey, there's a breakdown in social order and social trust that emerges as a result of, mass migration, all this stuff. It's only the people in the middle who are like, well, don't you know, the economy needs immigration, actually. Have you seen the birth rate, right? Time and time again. This is what we're dealing with. The cult of midwits and fake intellectuals. But anyways, that said, I want to break this down for you here today because we'll talk about, again, the state propaganda tagline. It gets even worse because Abby Phillip went on this whole fact-checking tirade about how actually Tim Walz was not referring to the fraud investigation when he tried to call conservatives white supremacists, even though he literally was. So we'll break that down for you guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate it. And that said, let's just take a listen to Abby Phillip's little, I'm the real journalist kind of moment here about Nick Shirley, because again, it's going to go through exactly what I'm describing. So let's take a listen.
So he goes to the facilities. Some of them had already been closed for some time. Minnesota officials.
If I'm not mistaken here, I think even CBS's fact check said only 2 of them had been closed the whole time. So, the hilarious thing is that CNN's been doing this rebrand where they're trying to frame themselves as neutral arbiters of the facts, okay? Abby Phillip will sometimes do this thing where she tries to be like, I'm not really a liberal because sometimes I ask Democrats hard questions. But just to be clear, she says some of them have already been closed as if like that's a lot. No, she's talking about 2 out of like dozens of them. The rest all had active licenses. CBS News in their fact check admitted the same thing. So that's the same one we made fun of a couple days ago.
So he goes to the facilities. Some of them had already been closed for some time. Minnesota officials say that each of the facilities that he visited had been visited at least once in the last 6 months. And so far, they found no evidence of fraud. So shouldn't he have to provide actual evidence of fraud before just walking up to a building and saying, fraud is happening here?
Again, Abby Phillip, do I have to explain that? Minnesota officials who are being widely accused of aiding, abetting, and benefiting from fraud said there's no fraud. And even here they note, investigations ongoing so far. So you mean they're being investigated for fraud, so there's probable cause of fraud, you know? Like, are we serious with this? Now, sure, I've said in all my videos that, well, none of, like, I'm not directly saying any of these businesses are committing fraud. I'm saying it's highly suspicious and it's something that needs to be investigated. So, sure, it hasn't been proven in a court of law. I guess, Abby Phillip, if that's the point you want to make, then sure, you can try to argue that. But I'm sorry, the idea that it's refuted or rebutted by Tim Walz saying the business is legitimate is the exact state propaganda we're calling out. That's ridiculous.
Fraud is happening here.
Who is he? Like, who gave this guy license to go around and say, I couldn't get in the daycare centers, the doors were locked? Like, nobody should be able to walk into a daycare center because the doors are locked. These random vigilante justice, something that people in this country know a lot about, these random vigilante justice seekers who ordain themselves like some sort of law enforcement expert, like he's a random YouTuber. And I just find it laughable that the party of the self-proclaimed pro-life people are celebrating cutting off funding to children. The white evangelical crowd who purports to uphold these Christian values are celebrating.
First of all, I think the whole point is that there's no children inside. We're still looking for proof that that's true. I mean, that it's true that there are even children inside, I guess I should say. And of course, here we go again, right? You're going to get the elitism. Who is this guy? He's just a YouTuber. Well, clearly he's having a lot more cultural impact than you, okay? So let's actually break that down since you want to try to do the whole he's irrelevant angle. So I'm looking, Tiffany Cross, at your current channel. Okay, you have 137,000 subscribers on YouTube. I mean, it's not nothing, but let's compare that, of course, to Nick Shirley, even my own channel. But of course, Nick Shirley, 1.39 million subscribers, okay? And by the way, currently, this guy is arguably the biggest news story in America. So you want to ask, who is that? He's not on CNN. Like, okay, they want to do this elitism thing. And yet, again, I point out, he's more influential. He should be asking who you are, Tiffany Cross. Frankly, I barely know who you are besides the fact that you're on the CNN show sometimes, okay? It's so ridiculous that they're going to do the elitism thing with us, right? Frankly, we should be asking at this point to these days to CNN who they are. But so that's, the defense mechanism number 2. This guy's just a YouTuber. He's irrelevant. Is that why you're talking about him so extensively? And this person is going to say Nick Shirley's irrelevant. Okay. Just look at the metrics. It's pretty straightforward.
Celebrating, targeting communities because of their ethnicity, and
no, they're being targeted because there's a high rate of fraud. It really is that simple, And if you want to say, oh, well, why is it always the brown communities? Well, just statistically speaking, that's where the highest crime rates are and the highest fraud rates are. What do you want me to say about it, right? It's the truth, You don't want it to be that way? Then actually go to the so-called communities of color and encourage them to stop living lives of crime, right? Basically, and I've brought this point up before, but frankly, I don't understand why this is not more of a widespread thinking, frankly, among minorities in America. It's like, if we don't want to be associated with stereotypes, then let's stop acting like stereotypes. Oh no, that's racist. Okay, then don't be scared when there's stereotypes, or don't make a problem out of it, right? Don't be shocked after your friends are and your family and all these people around you are committing a bunch of fraud, and then suddenly there's a targeted fraud microscope on your community. Yes, that happens for a reason, okay? Because police and law enforcement go where the crime is, dingus, right? So if you want to say, oh, we're targeting the Somali community, I mean, to a degree, yes, I don't actually disagree with that because there's a bunch of fraud and crime there. Yeah, it's true, right? Same thing in the black community when it comes to police. Yeah, that's actually true. And it's the way it should be, because if there's more crime in a certain area, there should be more police there. That's logical. You don't like that? Stop committing crime. It's not hard. It's not hard.
Cutting off care to children. It's utterly ridiculous. And I have to say, only a deplorable human being cannot decisively say it is wrong to target this community. We all heard what Donald Trump said from the White House. To pretend that this is some sort of opinion versus this opinion. No, we hear this right now. And so we have to call these things out with outrage, with righteous indignation, that this type of thing, one day it's the Somali community, the next day it's another community. What is hard about saying this is awful? What is hard about saying we should all care about children?
And it's not just
we should all care about you. There's no children inside. There's no children inside. Okay, New Year's resolution for America, guys. How about we just say things that are true and respond to realities of the world without being scared of being called racist? Because if you've noticed, this has been a left-wing tactic for like 3 decades now, right? They never want to talk about the ethnic breakdown of things like, say, just like crime rates or test scores or whatever it is. And then if you point that out, it's like, oh, no, you're racist or whatever. No, actually, you should use law enforcement to stop crime. Yeah. And again, I'll say, if there's more crime happening in a certain neighborhood or a certain area coming from certain groups of people, it's not to say all the Somalis are fraudsters or all black people are criminals or something like that. But it is to say, obviously, when you're crafting policy for society, you kind of have to react to trends. You know what I mean? And so in terms of, say, sending more police or doing more fraud investigations, yes, if you know something is happening a lot in a certain area, obviously you target that place, okay? But, anyway, so there you are. They're just going to call us racist. Notice how there's not actually pushback on the accusations themselves, right? They haven't actually provided a shred of evidence besides saying Minnesota and Tim Walz said so. In terms of, are the daycares actually legitimate or not? Is there actually a lot of fraud going on in the Somali community or not? She's just going to sit there and, call him racist basically for about 2 minutes straight. So anyways, there's point number 1 on this whole state propaganda angle. I just want people to recognize. I mean, let's see. Does this other lady have anything here to say?
It's racist and xenophobic. It's actually dangerous because...
Oh, okay, yeah, it's racist and xenophobic. Xenophobic, why? I mean, how can the truth possibly be xenophobic? Is it not true that there was a ton of fraud going on? Some of it proven in court, some of it under investigation, some of it you can just see with your own eyes, like, why are there no kids in that daycare, right? Is it xenophobic to say, oh, disproportionately this happens a lot more amongst the Somali community? No. Of course, the leftists are going to say, oh, but other people commit fraud too. Yeah, do you understand the definition of the word per capita? Okay. Do you know what that means? Right? Do you understand that when you're investigating fraud, and if you have, say, the police has an anti-fraud unit, sure, you want to catch everybody. But per capita, if a certain part of a certain state and a certain community has the most fraud going on, yes, you're going to keep a close eye on that place. Just like when it comes to police doing speed traps, right? They're going to hang out in places where they know a lot of people speed because you're going to catch the most crime that way. It's like talking to children. Okay.
Is what Donald Trump is doing in targeting this community. It's putting American citizens in danger because it is putting a target on their back. But there's something else that I think is really disturbing. To your point about who the...
See, again, here we go again. It's putting them in danger. It's putting a target on the back. They're targeting the community. Not once can they even argue that it's untrue, it's not happening, because it is. Because it is. They just call us a bunch of, it's racist. Shut the f up. Like, we don't care. We don't care. Again, New Year's resolution. We don't care what names you call us, okay? We are speaking the truth, and all you have in that's racist and xenophobic. Like... I'm so done with this. We just did the video, right? About what was going on in Europe on New Year's Eve, where the migrants just are literally shooting fireworks into nursing homes full of people. And then they go, it's xenophobic when you point out that it's 99% migrants engaged. I don't care. I do not care. Okay. It's the truth. And notice how offended they are by the truth. Okay. Anyways, that's on one hand. Now, that said, let us now take a listen to when Abby Phillip is once again going to run state propaganda for Tim Walz by trying to refute Scott Jennings' claim that Tim Walz tried to argue that the investigations of Somali fraud were white supremacy. Take a listen to what kind of happened on this exchange, and then we'll show you what Tim Walz actually said.
It's Democrats who have put Somali diaspora in Minneapolis at the center of their party and their state's politics. It's a small portion of the population. There is a bunch of fraud that goes on. And even Tim Walz has claimed that any investigation of this fraud is akin to white supremacy,
No,
which is
he
a
hasn't.
ridiculous
He has not
allegation.
claimed that. He has not said that.
He has said that.
He has not said that.
He didn't say that. Well, in a second, we'll play for you what Tim Walz actually said. But I don't want Scott Jennings' first point also there to be lost, because I think it's actually fantastic. The Democrats have pretty publicly set up a political machine with the Somali diaspora and the Somali vote in Minnesota. You know, I often compared it to Tammany Hall, which ironically was the Democrat Party political machine of the early 1900s in New York City, where they basically would take all the Irish and Italian and like ethnic, you know, Eastern European, all this stuff, immigrants who just got off the boat and would essentially give them out like free cash, food, jobs, social services, all that stuff in exchange for votes, right? Buying immigrant votes. It's very similar to what Democrats are pretty obviously doing in Minnesota. They purposely brought them to the state so that way, you know, now Minnesota is a place with a permanent Democrat majority, largely because of, you know, to a degree, that demographic change. And you can clearly tell it's not just a matter of, oh, the Somalis support the Democrats. There's definitely a lot of favoritism going on, you know? I mean, after all, you want the most obvious fact, of course, the Tim Walz and the Democrat state legislature of Minnesota literally changing the Minnesota state flag to look like the Somalian flag. I mean, does it get any more transparent than that, what's going on? But even then, I would point out, you know, the very well-documented fact that AG Keith Ellison in the state of Minnesota was turning a blind eye to Somali fraud for years, even saying that he would help expose the people who were trying to investigate it, right? The silencing of whistleblowers, all of these, you know, reckless welfare programs that always somehow manage to end up magically in the hands of Somali fraudsters. Obviously, there's that type of stuff going on. So that's what the Democrats have done, right? I've tried to make it very clear to people, it's not just a story about Somalis, it's also a story about, you know, Democrat leadership. But then finally, so this has been going on for decades, when Republicans in like 2025, I guess on the state level a couple years earlier, but you know, started to notice what was happening. They started to call it out. Hey, there's this big like fraud corruption machine, very similar to New York City and the political machines of the 1900s, right? Going on with the Somali vote and Somali diaspora in Minnesota. Let's start talking about it. Let's start investigating it. Then suddenly we're called the racist. Hey, how dare you notice that? Nothing's going on. See, this is a very common pattern in general. Democrats or leftists or liberals or, you know, whatever will do something or allow something or whatever. When we start to notice it and say, hey, you're doing the very thing you're doing, they turn around and call us xenophobic. So don't forget that point. But anyways, at the end there, of course, there's the full back and forth. Oh, Tim Walz never said that fraud investigations are white supremacy. Well, take a listen for yourself and let me know what you think about it.
This is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you. This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit. This is what happens when they scapegoat. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy, the idea of white supremacy, the idea of white supremacy, the idea of white supremacy.
So it seems pretty clear to me that that is what he was trying to say. I mean, sure, it's political rhetoric. He was being a little bit vague while he was speaking about it. But yeah, that is the insinuation, is it not? Well, take a look at what just went down today on X. So Eric Erickson pointed out here that CNN needs to start each Scott Jennings appearance with a fact check where Scott said something previously, Abby and the panel insisted it was not so, and we start the next show with a video showing that Scott was right the entire time. Now, Abby Phillip, for whatever reason, tried to step in here and prove that she was right. Here's what she had to say. Give me a break, Eric. He was not referring to the fraud investigations in that clip. He was talking about Trump and Vance denigrating the Somali community. There's plenty to criticize Walz for. That's very funny because you never do it, huh? As a matter of fact, you take his word as gospel when it comes to, are these businesses committing fraud? But anyways, there's plenty to criticize Walz for, but he did not say that investigating fraud was akin to white supremacy. Well, let's, I guess, take a listen to this clip again, because I want you to kind of go piece by piece, because again, you know, she's trying to argue here. He wasn't talking about fraud investigations. He was talking about Trump and Vance saying mean things about the Somalis. Yet, when I listen to it, I seem to get a very different message, but I'll point it out. Let's kind of go through this slowly, right?
This is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you.
It starts off with, this is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you. What has the federal government, of course, been heavily engaged in? Heavy anti-fraud investigations, as well as some immigration ones and all that, right? Terminating TPS. But it seems to me when he's not just saying, oh, this is what happens when the president demonizes you. Okay, sure, you could say that. This is what happens when the federal government, which includes more than just Trump and Vance, it includes, say, the FBI and the DOJ is waging war against you. What is the insinuation of that? The whole force of government's being weaponized wrongly. What is the whole force of government being used for? Not just words, but primarily what? Investigations. So again, I'll say this to Abby Phillip. Sure, you could argue he was being vague and you can't really tell which one he was speaking about. But at the same time, look how firmly and strongly she is speaking. She knows for a fact that Tim Walz was not talking about fraud investigations. How can you listen to this clip and reach that conclusion, right? If you want to say we're wrong, you don't have the proof that verifies your claim either, because when you listen to this, he never specifies, oh, I'm talking about, what Trump and Vance said. It seems like a broader picture. He's talking about the whole kind of action against the Somali community as, entirely, which is, of course, including, yes, fraud investigations. But let's listen to the rest. Let's go through it.
This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit.
They target communities with their own benefit. Again, what are the words being used here? These are action words, right? Target, not just demonize, whatever. Target. The federal government is waging war against you. Yeah, sure. I get it. Again, it's kind of vague. But if we're going to get technical about this, he's not using words of speaking or rhetoric. He's using action words, trying to paint the picture. Let's do rhetorical analysis here, right? Trying to paint the picture. There are actions being taken against the Somali community that are bad. Okay. So that to me seems to refer much more to the fraud investigations than, the rhetoric here, right?
This is what happens when they scapegoat. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy, the idea of white supremacy, the idea of white supremacy.
Yeah. I mean, it seems pretty clear to me. Now, this leftist here tries to, fact check us by saying, oh, well, if you listen to the full clip, he's talking about a J.D. Vance comment, and it's like conservatives debunked. And yet, when you sit and listen to this one as well, it still, listen to the full thing in context. I'll just point it out for you, right?
This is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you.
Yeah.
This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit. This is what happens when they scapegoat. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy. When you hear the Vice President of the United States talk about now white people won't have to apologize for being white. That's never happened once in my whole damn life. And I think everybody in this room knows what they're doing. So we're here today to say enough of this. We're here today to stand that Minnesota will protect their neighbors, to tell those folks who are out there who are too scared to send your children to school, who are too scared to visit a local business, who are too worried about...
Oh, wait a minute, huh? So first of all, Abby Phillip tries to say he's talking about Trump and Vance denigrating the Somali community. That's not even the context of what Vance was trying to argue here. But he goes on, sure, in the same conversation, right? Already, having established that, hey, all these other things are white supremacy. Okay, so they try to make this J.D. Vance argument. Yet notice what Walz continues to go on here to say, right?
Enough of this. We're here today to stand that Minnesota will protect their neighbors.
Minnesota will protect their neighbors from what? From what? What's going on? Is it just words or is it investigations? Huh? Also sounds like an action word, right? Not just we're going to speak out. See, he didn't say we're going to speak out. He said we're going to protect our neighbors. From what? From what? From words? No, from actions. Investigations, guys.
To tell those folks who are out there who are too scared to send your children to school, who are too scared to visit a local business.
Why are they too scared to send the kids to school or visit a local business? Is it because of words or is it because of investigations against schools and businesses?
Who are too worried about maybe picking up extra food during the holidays at the food banks. We will do all we can to make those corridors safe for you.
To make those corridors safe for you. From what? From people saying mean words? I mean, you ask me, it seems pretty straightforward what he is saying, right? And certainly, at most, you could try to argue Tim Walz was being intentionally vague, and neither Abby Phillip or me can definitively talk about what he was referring to. But to so definitively and confidently say, I know what Tim Walz was talking about in that clip, clearly you didn't, and clearly you don't, because you heard it for yourself, right? But anyways, that said, of course, if you're at all curious as to the motivations of this supposedly neutral arbiter of the truth, I mean, here she was, of course, even just recently talking about how her job at CNN is actually to explain, quote unquote, the facts to conservatives when we see this is what that really means.
Conservatives are living in a completely different information world
Absolutely.
than liberals. And breaking that down needs to be done. Because when you don't ever even hear the facts, it's hard to even know that you're wrong. And that happens a lot. I mean, half my job...
That's projection, by the way. That's projection. Yeah, true.
Half my job sometimes is knowing what the latest conspiracy is.
Yeah.
So that if it comes up, I'm ready to address it. Because it happens a lot where people don't even know that what they're saying or what they've seen and believe is not true. And so that happens a lot. And I don't come away from that saying, what's the point of this? People are just saying false things. I think that one time that person brings up something that is debunked and false, and I debunk it at the table, might be the very first time that someone out there has heard an alternative point of view.
So as usual, she has to throw in the whole high and mighty self-righteous nonsense. But even then, so according to her, this is the facts, right? The facts is my state propaganda from Tim Walz. The facts are that I ran like corporate PR revision for something really stupid that Tim Walz said without any obvious proof that my explanation of it was correct. But that's just the facts. I'm an arbiter of the facts, guys. No, you're not. You're a state propagandist, okay? And you wonder why trust in the media is at all-time lows, and you guys keep complaining about it. Who is this? This is just a YouTuber. Why don't they listen to us anymore? I'm Tiffany Cross. I'm on TV. That's why. Yeah, nobody cares about your stupid TV. Nobody cares about, my master's degree or whatever. That's why I'm smarter than you. It's just a stupid credentialism, by the way. Total behavior of midwit pseudo-intellectuals. That's what they love to do. Like, let me just throw my studies and credentials at people and not even know what they mean and not know anything. But don't you know I have a master's degree? Yeah, that's what someone does when they're actually not smart. But anyways, let me know your thoughts. Make sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.